Welcome to the Clayton Vance podcast, where we explore the art and soul of architecture and how it tells the story of us. This is where we answer all of your questions about why the world looks the way it does. And today, our guest is Roger Jackson. He is an architect and one of the former presidents of FFKR Architects, which I believe is one of the largest architectural firms in Utah, if not the largest, right?
Yep.
And in his storied 40-year-long career at FFKR, he worked on epic projects, religious, civic, institutional, commercial, across the spectrum. And one of the most recent ones that he was a project architect for was the restoration and renovation of the Salt Lake Temple, a very significant religious structure in the Western U.S. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later today. One other recent achievement, or award anyway, is he was honored by the Utah chapter of the American Institute of Architects in 2023 with the Bronze Medal, which is not third place. It's actually the most honored and distinguished award that Utah chapter awards and provides to a distinguished practitioner who has a tremendous body of work and also serves in the community, has left a legacy of architecture way beyond what your average person does, and we are privileged. I am privileged to have him here with me today talking about some of his work. So how this is going to go is we're going to just go through a quick little bio of his story, origin story, and then we're going to talk through a couple of his projects that are pretty epic, and then we're going to dive into the stuff that this channel is all about, the why of architecture. He's done a deep dive into the research of the treatises of architecture and has essentially been a self-taught classicist. Now, just really quick to set the stage for this, back in the advent of the Renaissance, there was a book called The 10 Books on Architecture that a few people found in old dusty libraries, and they dusted it off. And that's one of the things that spurred the architectural Renaissance of the 1500s and what we know today. Well, what happened in the early 1900s, all that got pushed out to the side again. And then in the early 80s, there was a group of architects. Roger Jackson was one of them who found those dusty books again and self-taught himself classical and traditional architecture and was able to apply that in practice. And that is why some of his projects are absolutely beautiful, timeless, epic, and will stand the test of time. So, Roger, thank you for being with me. So, quick origin story. In order to understand where anyone's coming from, we got to know, what they were like as a child.
Yeah.
But there's two questions I always ask, like employees as they're about to get hired. Number one, what do you think about, and you don't have to think about anything when your brain just goes, you have no work, family, church responsibilities. What do you think about? And then number two, what did you play with as a child?
As a young child, my family lived in the Netherlands. And we came home in 1963 and brought with us Legos. And my dad claimed, I don't know if it's true or not, but he claimed that those were maybe the first Legos in America in 1963.
Interesting.
So I got to do some homework on that.
Yeah, who wants to fact check us?
So I did a lot. I played a lot with Legos and Matchbox cars. And then in 1969, when Hot Wheels came out, then I was a Hot Wheels guy. So
I also played with Legos. That was my thing too. And I don't know what it is about architects and Legos, but it seems like all of us used to play with Legos.
Well, it's creating.
Yeah.
And it's the manual part too. And it's the click. Mm-hmm. That's important too. But lately I've had a lot on my mind. So when I have nothing else to think about, I'm thinking about these things that are on my mind. So you mentioned the deep dive into the treatises. I continue to worry about that and think about those things when I'm not thinking about other stuff. So,
So did you ever think you're going to be an architect when you're like a teenager or a kid?
No, not at all. In fact, maybe the opposite. My dad was an architect. He graduated, Richard Jackson, graduated from the University of California in Berkeley in 1942. And then came back, kind of started his own firm, just up and going. I remember as a kid, back in the day, today we use a scanner plotter. But back in the day, it was a blueprint machine, a diazo machine, that the activator was ammonia, like straight ammonia. And you'd take a piece of paper and your drawing that you drew by hand, and then you put it in the machine, and the light would go through the machine onto the paper and burn off the coating, but leave it where the lines were. It used to be the opposite. In the old days, it was blue paper, white lines. But then by the time I came around in 84, it was blue lines on white paper. And then you would take it out of there, and then you'd run that same, you'd take your drawing out and then put that print in the other that would then develop it in the activator, which was straight ammonia. And so I remember as a kid going down to my dad's office, like on a Saturday or something, hyperventilating in the parking lot because you had to sprint through the print room, which was, about this long. And just the smell of the ammonia was so bad that you'd have to hold your breath all the way in because of the ammonia smell. And the whole office smelled like that, and all architects did for a long, long time. Our office did too. And I started in 84. We had a diazo machine and had that ammonia. So that's like, no, I'm not doing that. But then in junior high, I figured out I was going to be a civil engineer. I wanted to do bridges and dams and roads and, big civil projects. Finished high school, did a year of that. Then I took 2 years off of school to go be a missionary in Seoul, Korea. Came back, but sometime in there, switched and said, I'm going to go to architecture school. And I remember the first time I said that out loud, it wasn't a real conscious thought, like I'd been planning on it. I just said it, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh boy, that's what I'm going to do. So somewhere in there.
So there wasn't any specific defining moment.
No.
It was just this.
And so, yeah, my dad influenced me, of course, but it didn't work on any of my siblings, but it did on me. And so I jumped right into school and, 6 years later, spit out as an architect.
I think this is a really important thing for everyone to understand, who doesn't really understand. Most people don't realize the technological advancements that have happened in the last 40 years in the architecture field.
It's crazy.
If we look at the last since humanity began and how they actually drew architecture, it was on metal plates or stone or.
Well, in the Renaissance times, they built scale models, and then the carvers knew what to do.
Yeah,
Brunelleschi built a 1/4 size model of the Duomo or something like that.
Yeah,
that then the carvers would go look at and then go build it. And it was really only after, like Alberti, who talks about and saying you need to draw your build. You can draw your buildings, that then architects started drawing things. And because the pictures we see in the books are all after the fact. They were woodcuts. Vignola was copper plate, but the pictures we see in the oldest copies of the treatises were all woodcut.
Yeah. So then we have the 1900s and a technological revolution. Computers get invented around 60s-ish, 70s?
Yeah, about. Yeah.
And technology, blueprint technology, computers start coming on. How far were you into your career when you first, the advent of CAD?
Okay, I graduated from school in 84, and we were all hand drafting. Everything was hand drafting. There was no CAD work at all. Mm-hmm. By 85 or 6, it had started with the computers. And our office used an older system called ARIS, ARRIS, mm-hmm. And used that for a long time. And the guys who worked it really liked it a lot. And then they would plot with an ink pen mm-hmm. on a plotter, XY, drawing with an ink pen on the paper or vellum.
Holy cow.
Or mylar. And if the pen skipped like they do,
Yeah.
you got to plot it over again. It was terrible, but it was the coolest, greatest thing, you know? And so slowly we got out of hand drawing and everything went to the computer. And so that started for us in 85 or 6. And I started in 84. And so it was just right after that. We did a big project that the drawings were issued in 93.
Mm-hmm.
No, 89. Yeah, drawings were issued in 89. And some of that set was plotted on the computer, but we knew it was, the technology was spooky enough that we plotted things a month early to make sure we could get them out. And then it was all finished by hand over the top of the plot, because we plotted onto Mylar, and then you could draw on the plastic Mylar. Yeah. And so we plotted everything out a month early, and then finished it all by hand. So you look at those drawings, and there's lines that you can tell are drawn with the ink pen plotter, and you can tell what's been done by hand. So that set in 89 was a lot of both.
So then,
but then we got off of Eris and then jumped onto AutoCAD with the rest of the world. At least the rest of our world. I know there are parts of the country where they use ArchiCAD and other CAD systems more than we do around here.
Yeah.
But around here, everybody's AutoCAD.
Yeah.
And then Revit came.
Yeah, then Revit came.
Yeah. And so one of these days, Autodesk is going to say, sorry, we're not going to support AutoCAD anymore.
Yeah.
But we have clients that's what they want is AutoCAD.
Yeah, I still have clients the exact same way. Because when I was at school, we still learned hand drafting, watercolor, and I still think that is the best way to actually learn.
Yeah.
And then when I started, we learned AutoCAD in school. I started with AutoCAD, and then Revit had already come out, but I really adopted it about my second year. Yeah. I'm like, well, if it's the future, I might as well adopt it. And it feels like cheating. It feels like a crutch mentally.
Yeah.
And I have issues with employees who use it as a crutch and don't really, it's like, no, you can't let it drive you. It looks like it drives you.
Yeah.
It's really nice for client presentations because they can see the whole house in 3D or project. But
well, one advantage that we like in Revit is that whatever state your model is in, you can go in Enscape and walk around and see your model.
Yeah.
You know, you're familiar with Enscape? It's a plug onto Revit. And you can either do it with the VR glasses or just on your monitor, and you learn how to move your mouse around, and you can walk through your model in whatever state it's in.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that on a project once where we had a Belvedere, an upper balcony. And so in the model, I'm wearing the goggles, and in the model, I'm standing at the balcony, and the guy said, the operator, the guy that was helping me, he said, step off. And I knew I was in the conference room with the floor, and my brain would not let me step off that balcony.
Okay.
And then I got stuck in the wall. So this was a big, deep cavity wall with an exterior skin, and I'm stuck in the wall. And I can't get out. It was not good.
That story is going to sound so funny for someone who actually lives in the new virtual reality that's going to completely exist in about 10 years.
But my story is, and that first project that came out in 89, I was kind of the project architect guy. I was meeting with the client and his boss and his boss and his boss in this organization that we were working for. And it was not the highest and best use of my time to learn the computer. And that might sound weird to say learn the computer, but to learn AutoCAD and to do work on the computer. And after that, I was the boss on other things, and my career morphed into being the design guy, which I could do with a pen and colored pencils and stuff. and I was the client keeper. I had the relationship with the client, and I'm designing things. Other people are doing the heavy lifting of the production of the contract documents. So I never learned it. Really, I'm the last of the dinosaurs, Clayton. Because I never learned. I was an early adopter of SketchUp. But there were people in the office better than me, and that was not the best use of my time, because I could have somebody else do what I wanted quicker. I could sketch what I wanted. They could draw. They could do it quicker.
And draft it quicker.
So that was not my highest and best use. And so I'm truly the last of the dinosaurs.
Wow. I'm jealous. And I admire that. So I was forced into it. And my quick funny story is I refused to learn to type and get on the computer because I just wanted to hand draw. I wanted to draw. And when I was in high school, and my mom finally made me take a typing class. It's like, sorry, you have to learn this.
You have to know how to type.
I'm not typing your papers anymore. And then and then the email came out, and then the internet, and oh brother, now what? And so I
was an early adopter of the computer for that.
Oh, nice.
Our office had a portable computer. It was like the size of a microwave oven. And the face came off, and that was the keyboard. And the screen was this big. Amber. If you ever saw those oldest CRTs, they were an amber screen about this big. And WordPerfect was on 2 discs. So an actual floppy disk, we say floppy disk, but they weren't floppy for long. But an actual floppy disk was WordPerfect, and you type. And then when you'd want to do something, they'd say, put in disk 2. It was so archaic, but it was so cutting edge and cool. And so we had this portable computer, and now you have 1,000 times more horsepower.
We may pull something
in a
up.
3-pound thing.
I know on this. Have you spent any time in AI yet?
Just a little bit.
We're going to look at a couple things, and it will blow your mind what is about to happen in the future.
And see, that's
of architecture.
The next big change in architecture that I'm going to miss, because it's going to happen without.
Yeah, and I would be grateful I'm missing you, because I think this is going to be such a disruption. I don't think most of us know exactly how to handle what's about to come down there.
I agree. I don't think we know yet what to do.
And
I know our office has struggled to develop a policy for AI. And I don't know how that's working.
Yeah. So just to recap on just overall life experience, just so everyone knows, the technological advancements over the last 40 years have gone so fast, and they are about to get faster and faster and faster. The ability to keep up is difficult, almost impossible.
Yeah.
And so what are the fundamental things that actually make for a good architect? Is it the technology, or is it something else?
I think the technology has to be the tool that you use. But the architect, it's, for me, and this will be seen, I think, as generational, because I'm an older generation in architecture, but I think there's a connection between the head, the heart, and the hand.
Yeah.
And I think you draw, at least for me, that's the way I have to work that way. And I think that is what will create the architecture, and then the drafting and production software, AutoCAD or Revit, and is the tool to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I know you can put in a floor plan into AI program and say, optimize this floor plan, and it could do stuff. And I know you can do that, but I think that it still has to come from the heart of somebody.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've been in ChatGPT and Gemini, Google Gemini, asking it these questions.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT is like, oh yeah, it's going to automate and your profession is going to change a ton, but it'll still be there. And then I asked Google Gemini essentially the same question, will AI take over architecture? And said, no way. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
To actually have its responses. Like, in the end, the response was, architecture is a profession that has too many human elements in it that are essentially of an emotional nature, that there's no way for AI to properly interpret or produce results.
I believe that. But that also might be generational, because I'm an old guy. And not as immersed in the culture.
I
think the 20-year-olds who will be growing up with AI will use it totally differently in 5 years than we might think of it today.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the workmanship of the hand, the workmanship of what comes from here. Okay, but like the creative experience that you have, how do you generate ideas? It's like, where do they come from? If you were to try to explain that to someone, with you're sitting there, you're drawing in front of the client.
Yeah.
And then people are, in all honesty, when they watch you do that, they're amazed.
They're dumbstruck. It's a great parlor trick.
Yes, but it's more than a parlor trick.
It's the process. It's
the process.
And
how do you explain that process? Where does that come from?
I don't know. And I've thought about that a lot, of how to teach the design principles and the design experience. For me, it just starts drawing, and you have to force yourself to draw something. Draw it, because it's iterative. You have to draw it, analyze it, revise it, analyze it, revise it, analyze it. And you have to keep doing that until you get it. And you ought not to be afraid to draw the same dang floor plan 25 times until you get it right. But in the real world, you don't have that much time. You got to get to the answer quick. And so that's where you can draw on your experience. And you have to think there's too many balls in the air simultaneously. You're thinking sun angles, prevailing winds, slope of the site, the programmatic requirements of the project, rooms, so many X number of rooms of this size and this, and then doing this and this, numbers of bathrooms and toilets. And you have to try to juggle all of that. And you want to think about the experience of the person visiting this thing and coming down this hallway, turning into this room and this room. You have to think of the space and size. You're not just working on a floor plan. You're also in your head thinking about the three-dimensional of it. Like, this is a big room. It's going to need to be taller, which means I've got to make the whole floor tall enough to have this big room, and there'll be lots of ceiling space above all of these smaller rooms. You got to think all that through, and I'm going to have windows and some kind of a roof. That's the hard part about design, is you have too many variables, and you have to just, your brain can do it, but it's really hard. And you do that, you get slammed into it in school without any like real teaching you how to do it, or the ideas and the principles. And then and then you do it again.
Yeah.
And next semester, then you do it again. And so you develop your way from your head and heart. And you and I could have been classmates. And then in the end, we would have different approaches.
Yeah.
I had friends that in our office that would start out way differently than I would. Mm-hmm. They would take the program and cut out different pieces of colored paper, approximately the size of it, and then rearrange all the colored papers. That's like, I can't do that. I would rather sketch it and wing it and be mostly wrong, but mostly right.
Uh-huh.
And then refine it, and then refine it, and then refine it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my process.
Yeah.
But other people just work differently. And I think there are principles that we ought to know, which I've tried really hard to learn for myself, because they don't say it. That book right there, Robert Adam, he has 6 pages at the back that talk about design principles. None of these other treatises from antiquity talk about the principles of design. They talk about architecture and talk about the orders and all the stuff.
Yeah.
But they don't say you need to keep track of an access through this.
Uh-huh.
You need to keep track of the space and volume.
Yeah.
And Robert Adam, written in what, 90 or 85?
Yeah.
He actually talks about design principles. So I actually have written a thing, and it's now 15 years old, and it's just living document craziness, but it's this thing I wrote trying to glean from all of this, these principles of design. You know, the idea of symmetry, the idea of how to handle asymmetry, hierarchy, space, volume, the axis. I mean, when I went to school, they would start out with a structural grid and then try to fit everything in the structural grid.
Yeah.
That's the way I was taught.
Yeah. That's,
And I've subsequently come to think that I've got to get the major axes through the building and the spaces organized, and then worry about the structural grid.
yeah.
Not the other way.
Not the other way.
Yeah. But that's the way I learned. And so, and people have asked through the years, well, how do you do this? And I said, well, it's hard to explain,
Yeah.
because honestly, when you're just drawing stuff, you kind of get in the zone. I don't know if that's shifting to the right brain or what.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of artists say they get into the zone and they can't explain it exactly. Yeah. But I kind of feel that same way, as you get in the place where this stuff makes sense, and you literally can keep track of all of that stuff, all of those variables, or most of them, as you're sketching and drawing. And then the great value of the sketch tissue paper is tear it off, work it over again. Oh, red pen. Oh, no, black pen. Tear it off, crumple it up, do it again, and do it again, do it again. And you can, and then you're thinking, okay, what's this look like on the side, you know? Or is the upstairs line kind of lining up with the downstairs? You're thinking of all of that at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to explain coherently, because it's this thing that takes you.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where it starts to gel and starts to make sense. And then you're refining things and getting closer, and then you dig in, and then you step back out. The design process is really, really hard to codify, because it's going to be different for everybody.
I appreciate everything you just said, because it's exactly what I go through. Yeah, it's exactly what I go through. The macro micro side of the tendency. I was trying to explain something to one of my employees in terms of how I process like design decisions and stuff, and how to go through every single thing. And after I was done explaining, he said, "Oh, so it's super easy. You just have to think of everything all at once."
Yeah. So, okay, Marianne Casado, her book, she gives a really good description of kind of the design process. And one of her little sub chapters is what to think about when you design ... everything. Yeah. Yeah. Because you have to think about everything. And what's the view? What am I going to be? What if this is the big and lovely window? What am I looking at? So in the neighborhood, what am I looking at in these windows? You got.
I want everyone out there, because I run through the same thing. So whereas everyone's mesmerized with you drawing, I just don't draw as much anymore. And like any skill.
Shame.
I know, it is a shame. Yeah, complete shame. It's horrible.
People always ask me, how you draw so great. Well, not really, actually, but I mean, I can draw kind of architectural stuff.
Yeah.
All day long.
Yeah.
How'd you do that? And I said, well,
practice.
This was what I did at school, and I've been doing it for 40 years. And you did some at school too.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it anymore?
I am right.
And they go, oh man, I don't. Oh yeah, you can't. I said, get you a sketchbook. When you have a little design problem, figure it out on your little sketchbook, and then jump into Revit.
So my design process now is actually I'll do general massing first, and I'll take it into Sketchbook Pro. So I'll do a 3D print screen and go over to my tablet and then draw on the tablet.
Right.
And so it's still not on paper. It's detached, and I don't like it, but it's better than nothing.
Steve Goodwin does that too, and that's like super good at it. I'm actually jealous of the technology because he can draw and Procreate and do just everything he wants.
Yeah.
And then prints it off. It looks so good with a border and a title and all that. And it's like, dang,
Yeah.
I wish I could do that. But I just I have a bag full of pencils here, you know?
Yeah. And so this creative process, let's just stick on this for just one more second, because I want everyone out there to realize how challenging this is. In my process, what'll happen is, because I've designed so many homes now, like people love watching me work in real time, and so in Revit,
Right.
and just moving floor plans and stuff around. And so that's how I learned it. So I became stupid proficient at schematic design stuff in Revit, like crazy fast.
Good for you. That's incredible.
And so it's fascinating for someone who is coming from the outside, not understanding the creative design process. You know, one of the tricks, and the parlor tricks, is I've solved this problem 10,000 times.
Yeah. So that's another thing that you get when you're designing, is that, oh, this is like that building that we did.
Yeah.
Oh, we did this here.
Yeah.
And you can pull out of the Wayback Machine, you know, you can pull out of your head things that solved a certain issue on other projects in your past, and other things that you've seen.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you do, you know, kind of a precedent-based design, which of course I didn't do in school. I've subsequently learned that what are the good examples of what I'm trying to do?
How much more challenging is it to do kind of invention from nothing versus invention from,
I don't know.
From precedent?
Who are the real innovators in architecture today? Name me one. Gotcha. You can't.
No.
Who is it?
No.
Maybe Julie Gang.
I don't even know.
Okay, she's practicing in Chicago. She's really quite inventive, but she's kind of a knockoff of Zaha Hadid, who was a true actual innovator.
Yeah.
And then let's fast backwards to Frank Lloyd Wright, an actual innovator.
Yes.
And then maybe Corbusier and Gropius and Mies van der Rohe.
Yeah.
Who are the innovators in architecture? Is it Craig Hartman at SOM in San Francisco, designing beautiful glass towers? No, he's doing knockoffs of the Lever House.
Yeah.
He's doing knockoffs of Mies van der Rohe.
Yeah.
In any old way you can morph it to be inspired by so-and-so. Multiple generations after Corbusier, Gropius, and Mies van der Rohe, then Frank Lloyd Wright. Who else is an actual innovator in architecture? And people get after the classicists because, oh, you're just copying. You're just copying stuff. So is everybody else.
Yeah.
Because that's why we publish the glossy magazines.
Yeah.
Don't fool yourself. The AIA publishes the glossy magazines so we can all look at them and copy each other. That's exactly it. They just wouldn't dare.
That's what Pinterest is for.
That's exactly what Pinterest is for. It's exactly it. And my Pinterest page, I have a ton of stuff on all kinds of different architecture and stuff. Because you look at it and all of that informs you and lets you be creative.
It seems almost impossible to draw from an empty well. And my impression was even Frank Lloyd Wright in Sullivan's office, he was still drawing from an enormous amount of Asian influence while inventing a new thing.
Yeah.
And then Richardson and his invention, the Richardsonian Romanesque style, coming from the Beaux-Arts, but then combining that with Byzantine and Romanesque from the Middle Ages, and pure invention. I think this is one of the things that people don't realize, is that there is no real absolute pure invention in almost any art.
Right. That's kind of my point of saying, who are the innovators today? Well, really,
yeah,
not. Everything's been done.
Yeah.
And everything is just a knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff of something else.
It's okay. Parallel movies. It's like movies. There were stories to be told, and new stories and new stories and new stories, and the whole cinematic universe of Marvel and DC Comics and all that type of stuff. And then the 80s had and the 90s had just this vomiting of creative movie types, and now all we have is regurgitations of
now we do live action of the cartoons that we all loved.
Yeah. And it's almost
My children loved it.
but it really is almost as if that pure invention is a rare
Yeah.
thing, and it has to be a certain time in a certain place with certain individuals in a certain group.
Yeah.
And that's when that genius begins to.
Yeah. Like Jaws came out 50 years ago today.
Wow.
The movie Jaws. I saw that.
What about the original Star Wars? That's 50 years.
No, that came out in 77.
77 in 2 years.
I watched that in English with Korean subtitles in Seoul. It was hilarious because we're with a bunch of, American missionaries, and we're laughing at things, and all the Koreans in the audience were like, well, that wasn't funny. And then the translation would catch up, or something would happen in the translations, and they're all laughing, and we're hearing it in English, and we're thinking, well, that wasn't funny. And it was pretty great.
So this creative endeavor that all of us are a part of, that now in a world where it seems like every upcoming Gen Z or Gen Alpha, I want to be a creator. That's what I want to be. I want to be a creator. It's like, what does that even mean, everybody? And so if we take a step back from the novelty of what we think it means to create and go to the actual sustainable, timeless creations of times past, when we dig up civilizations, what are the things that remain? The things that remain are the footings, the foundations, the floors of civilization.
Yeah. And the detritus or whatever.
Yeah.
The junk that gets thrown out.
That's the story. Those are the things that make the story. It's the architecture. Architecture is a symbolic representation. And so diving into the treatises, there's no way of escaping. We live in a world that is, in all reality, mostly ugly. And why is it ugly? Because people designed it ugly. We designed it ugly.
Yeah.
Why did we design it ugly? Now, having grown up, I didn't know I wanted to be an architect. And I ended up at the University of Notre Dame by a series of coincidences where I was taught from the likes of you at Notre Dame, traditional and classical architecture. And so I don't know a world without it in terms of design. Explain to me what it was like going through school, studying architecture. Was there a disconnect in your mind between here's what I want to create, this, versus here's what I'm being taught?
No, because I didn't know what I wanted. For my own experience. My professors at the University of Utah, more than any of the other professors, I had John Sugden the most. And John Sugden had an interesting, fascinating life. He was in the 10th Mountain Division in World War II, where they skied. Mm-hmm. They wore white uniforms and had white rifles, and they skied and went wing, and he was in the 10th Mountain Division. It's just incredible. But he had worked for years and years in the office of Mies van der Rohe. And so he comes to the University of Utah and is teaching, and every project in his studio courses, you almost had to do some version of the Seagram building, because that's what he was expecting. And I took his high-rise studio class, and the thing was full of beautiful bronze glass boxes. And mine was kind of a precast concrete clad building with the corners cut and a little bit different color on top. And it was kind of a yellowy, buffy color. And he hated it. And he gave me a B. He punished me with a B. And I took it gladly. Because I did not want to do that. I mean, that's what, and every other building in that studio came out with some version of the Seagram building or the Lakeshore Drive apartments. And that's just what it was. That's just what he expected. I had him more than any other professor. The other professors, so I was at a unique time in school in 1984 that was kind of with Michael Graves, Charles Moore, and sort of the emergence of postmodernism.
Right.
And so that was kind of cool, but nobody yet dared to do it. So my thesis project in '84, I did a town hall for a small town in central Utah. And I was thinking more traditional, kind of fit with the town. But it all of a sudden got out of my control and became this postmodern statement. And I knew my thesis advisor would go to bat for me no matter what, because I knew the other people would hate it because it wasn't a modern building, but I knew he would go to the mat for me. And so I passed, but it was this traditional building that made a lot of people crazy. And the same John Sugden, smoking his cigarette in the studio, said in the critique, he says, "That looks like the city and county building in Salt Lake City," which is a beautiful, Richardson Romanesque kind of building, just absolutely terrific building. And he thought that was an insult. And I said, well, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted you to think, that this looks like the city hall. This looks like the city government. He was so mad at me because I turned his criticism into a compliment, because it looked like what it was trying to be, where every other project could have been each other's program in the same kind of building.
So you are a rebel, a nonconformist.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Why the...
Well, yes and no, because in my career, I stumbled upon a client that had beautiful historic buildings that needed love.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not going to muck them up with some of me in it.
Yeah.
I always tried to think, and it may sound goofy, but to think of the original architect was so-and-so. If he was doing then what we're doing now, what would they have done?
Mm-hmm.
And I can name examples of that, where then we researched that architect to see other things that they had done and tried to copy that. I want William Folsom, great Utah architect, to get the credit for this building that we did. I say that tongue in cheek because I would need the credit because I want to get the next job too.
Yeah.
But it's really about that. Because how many buildings do you see that get mucked up with some dumb architect's great idea that messes up the original building?
Oh, yeah.
That happens all the time. All the time. So we did an addition, a project that really changed my life in my head. We did an addition on a kind of ugly school building for Davis County School District. This was a building, they had 8 or 9 of them, and we needed to add on like 4 more classrooms. And the classrooms were kind of miserable. They all had one lousy window. And so I had seen a lot of schools with additions on it, and the addition looks nothing like this school. Mm-hmm. And then you get this carbuncle on a wart, and it just looks ridiculous. So I said, I'll let that guy, and I can't even remember who the original architect was. I'll let that guy take the credit. And so we designed this new addition to exactly match the old school. We could still find that same exact brick. Mm-hmm. And so the new part exactly matched the old thing, except we put, instead of one lousy window, we put in 2 pairs. So we had 4 windows in each classroom. But you look at the building and then it takes you a second to realize, oh, these have more rooms, because this gives you a more noble, better building. Mm-hmm. And it's not about me. It's not about me. Mm-hmm. It's about that school and that community. I don't want them to look at that school and go, oh, except this thing and this big wart, because that really hit me, that we have to be sympathetic to when we step in a historic environment, or when we touch a building, we have to be sympathetic to that building. And it ought not to be my voice. It ought to be the voice of that building.
Okay, let's turn the tables real quick. 50 years is what the so-called Department of, I don't remember what department controls HABs and historic American building survey and stuff, but they said back in the day it made sense.
The Secretary of the Interior Standards?
Yep.
Is that what you're talking about?
Because
I totally disagree. Is it 3 and 9? That says the new work must be in the time of the time. So if you touch an old building, it must be distinguishable from the original fabric.
Is horrible.
And I say no, heck no.
No way.
No, because that's why you get so many stupid-looking buildings.
Stupid-looking buildings. Yeah. But the issue, especially with
it's not like this is some big architectural fraud.
No, it's ridiculous.
We're making a beautiful building. And I don't care that that this piece of the Louvre doesn't match this piece of the Louvre. It's all sympathetic, and it doesn't bother me, nor does it encourage me that each hunk of that was a little bit different.
Yeah. But my issue that we now have is that now the 1970s would be considered historic architecture.
Yeah, right.
Now, here's an interesting thing, talking to Gen Alphas, Gen Zers and stuff, and what they think is cool. And like millennials, young millennials, generally what I've seen is a resurgence of that mid-century modern vibe, which actually has, I think, stylistic coherency to it. But once you hit the 70s and postmodernism, it is so, as far as I could tell, completely incoherent from any design theory.
Yeah, that the mid-century modern, when it was done well, is really lovely.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
and from a classicist, that might be weird to hear, but I really love it, and I think really good modernism, but it has to be done really well,
right?
And there's not a lot that's done really well, and so Stephen Sims in that book, The Future of the Past, you need to get that.
Okay.
He talks a lot about the Secretary of the Interior Standards and how it's nuts because it doesn't make for better architecture. And it's not like this is some great fraud that we're pulling over the eyes of the people. I think if you're going to touch a beautiful mid-century modern building now, you better be good at it, and you better study the precedents. You better study that old building because it's easy to muck it up. Because those buildings were so simple that it's about the materials. And if you're going to build a building with lousy materials and crappy carpet instead of terrazzo or stone slabs, it's not going to look as good as the original.
Right.
You better be very good and very careful.
Right.
And honestly, that's probably going to cost more than your client is going to want to pay.
Yeah.
That's going to be a really hard sell unless they're really in love with the building.
Okay, let's fast forward to the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, postmodern, all the stuff, and then trying to recapture the aesthetic of traditional stuff. And we did a horrible job at it, generally speaking. Why, or could there be? Why are they ugly? Why is postmodernism? And what's interesting, what if to boil this down to a layperson's understanding of stuff? Really, what it boils down to is anything prior to 1920 would be considered traditional architecture, because it all followed a very similar language, regardless of style.
Right.
From the 30s up to the end of the 50s, you had what we call mid-century modern, because it was in the mid-century and it was the height of the modernist movement, especially in the U.S. and the international movement in Europe. And so it was really about blast and steel and the culmination of the Industrial Revolution and how everything was just going to be just glass, steel, no ornament, no decoration, functional only. Form follows function. That was it. And then what happened is we all realized that, wow, this stuff actually
said Louis Sullivan, who highly ornamented and decorated his buildings.
Yes. And so everyone took the originator of the statement, form follows function, and then just turned it into their own, like, honestly bastardized interpretation of it to just be a lesser understanding of what his original intent probably was. And then we have, I think, just acid trip upon acid trip upon acid trip once you get to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we have honestly some of the weirdest conglomerations of previous styles that has led to the world in which we live now.
Here's my take on this. At the turn of the 1900s, Otto Wagner started it in the 1890s, and then the World War I, and there was these people were really trying to think of new things. They were trying to strip off the ornament, maybe not quite the extent like Adolf Loos says ornament is crime, but they were really trying to do a new thing. And I really appreciate the early modern architects. There was some war fatigue, socioeconomic issues, and that technology then changed. I mean, the technology advancement in every field has been crazy since about that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the elevator you can do an elevator, structure of steel, or cast iron. You can do more things. So the technology, the socioeconomic stuff, the war fatigue, and just a reaction, a visual aesthetic reaction against the neoclassicism of the past. There were all these things that brought about modernism. What they got were what they forgot in those years, which is then perpetuated clear till now in architecture schools, is they've forgotten the guiding principles talked about in Vitruvius.
Yeah.
That this thing has to be beautiful, and it has to work, and it has to be appropriate to the use. And the idea of symmetry, not bilateral symmetry, but the idea of similar metric symmetry, where proportionally this to this is the same as this to this and this to this. And proportional things are thought through. The idea of even this, as simple as the golden section, where you think of the proportions of things. I believe architects forgot that because they had the freedom to do anything they wanted.
Yeah.
And forgot these principles. And that's why the world is ugly today. That's why so much of it doesn't have, and even if you could take those buildings, run them through the Vitruvian filter, even firmness, commodity, and delight, even that, let alone the 12 principles or the other 6 principles he mentioned, if you could run any building through that and make sure you hit all of those things, you could make it better. It could be better.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that Vitruvius and the Renaissance architects and that type of stuff, who really talked about fundamental principles of composition, architectural composition, is like the analogy of the kite, where the kite can stay afloat and fly higher and higher and higher because it's tethered
only
to a set of grounded rules.
Yes. The kite flies only because I'm holding the string.
And as soon as I can do whatever I want to do, I let go of the string because I can do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, you just lost your bearings, and now everything.
And modernism gains its cachet by the innovation, the wow. Nobody says, they don't want you to say, oh, wow, that's beautiful.
No.
They want you to say, wow, that's cool. Right?
Yep.
You said it together.
Yep.
They want that. That's what they're going for. Wow, that's
cool.
Nobody's thinking, I want to make this thing beautiful.
No.
Now Ramsett does on their, Robert Stern's office. They do some beautiful, very contemporary work. I feel like the Comcast Tower in Philadelphia. You got to go see it. It's awesome. But it's beautifully done. And I think if you had that mindset of being beautiful, trying to find beauty, which nobody even wants to define, right?
No,
we've been struggling with that.
Next.
We've been struggling with the definition of beauty for centuries.
Yes.
But you know it when you see it. And you can make a quick decision of like the beauty scale. Near Burris talks about the beauty scale of like 1 to 1 to 10 of, what do you think of this? Real quick, and you have to come, oh, that's a 3. Oh, that's a 6. That painting, that's a 10. That thing's only a 4. You can come up with that of, is this beautiful? And you would know that as an architect if you were looking to make it beautiful, but you're not thinking that. You're looking for cool.
Yeah.
And it gets its strength by contrast to the beautiful historic building next door.
Yeah.
It's parasitic. It has to be in contrast to the beautiful historic building next door.
When people absolutely love Frank Gehry's stuff, and I think it's fascinating, I do say, well, imagine walking through an entire city full of that stuff.
Have you ever been in one of his buildings?
I still haven't.
Okay, I went through the museum in Bilbao, and it's shocking. Yeah. It's in this beautiful, old city, and you walk down all of these streets with this beautiful, 5-story canopy, and and then here's this thing, and you walk in it, it's like, wow, what? Wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was terrible for the display of art, but it's like, wow.
It's cool.
Wow. But it's all wow.
Yeah. Yes.
And like, it's just more wow. And then pretty soon it's like, I'm wowed out.
Yeah, I'm wowed out. And that is the problem with modernist thought. And honestly,
then I can walk outside of there and walk up and down every street in that city and say, wow, that's beautiful. Look how beautiful that is. This building, that building, this building, that building, that door, that window, that step, that stoop on the house. I can say, wow, look at all of this variety of beautiful, where that is just one wow.
Yeah.
We're using wow like it's a thing, but
I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes I wonder to myself, am I even like understanding my own reality correctly? Because the way I talk about it is the exact same way where most of the time when I'm interviewing a couple, get this. And so most men, what are men mostly like attracted to? Things and technology and cool stuff. So men will come with really sleek precedent images or inspiration images of homes, and then women will come with what?
Beautiful stuff.
Beautiful little cottages.
This is lovely. I love this thing.
I love
this. This is so beautiful. I love this. Right.
Who designs most of the world in which we live? Men.
Yeah.
Who builds most of the world in which we live?
The fellas.
Who develops the land? Who, you know what I'm saying? It's like, there's a reason why the world is ugly. Is because all the guys who are like infatuated with the novelty of technology and the new and the wow and the cool are the ones who have built it all over the last 150, honestly, forever.
That's the value of Marianne Cosado's book, is that if you could give that to every home builder and house plan person, the world would step up.
Step up, yeah. It would
just
step up.
A notch or two.
Yeah.
The world would step up. And the difference is, the shock about that book is that the differences are really small.
Yeah.
Because every home is a knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff. And I mean, I live in a arts and crafts bungalow, which is its own little tangent. Next door to me is this English Tudor revival home. It's its own little tangent. On the other side of me is this little box with a pitched roof, which is a knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff of a little colonial revival home.
Yeah.
Which is what most homes, I'm looking at all of these pitched roofs, even if it's kind of contemporary, that's a knockoff thrice removed from colonial revival home.
Yeah.
That's what people live in.
Yeah.
So we ought to make those a little better.
Yeah.
Even if that person loves modern architecture, they come home to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing ought to be better. And that's the point of Cosado's book, is that it can be better. All of these old traditional homes we can make better with just a little bit.
Small little details.
Yeah.
So let's look, in terms of, if someone is actually going to listen to this thing who isn't an architectural enthusiast and like trying to understand this very esoteric conversation, define what a treatise is, because that's where all of this really stems from, is architectural treatises. Yeah. How could we easily describe what an architectural treatise is?
This is not for public consumption.
Not for public.
But as part of all my homework for that lecture, that's where I stored everything I learned. I'm trying to talk to Pete Miller at Traditional Building Magazine, see if he'll publish that. But so a treatise, by definition, is a book on a subject. So every, ideally, theoretically, every book is a treatise, right? But so for our purposes, what we're talking about, the treatise is a book about architecture. And this guy, Marco Pollio Vitruvius, he was a builder in Roman times, not in Rome. He was a builder, and he wrote this thing that talked about building and construction in his day. And he talks about a lot of things. Where in the nature is the best place to put a city? Which way should the main temple of the city face? How to do streets. He talks about construction of details of stuff, but then he talks about the different kind of styles or types or varieties of architecture based on what he knew. And so he wrote it somewhere on parchment or something. And like they did. And so he wrote it in 25 BC. It probably got copied and copied and copied. And then it sat in the library of a Swiss monastery at St. Gall, a Florentine guy, a guy from Florence, who was looking for cool stuff, goes there and finds it, brings it back to Florence. That was really one of the sparks of the whole Renaissance, the whole Italian Renaissance. And Florence was the epicenter of it. That was in like 1416 when they found his, and it hints at drawings, but no drawings were found with this copy of the manuscript. This wasn't from his hand. This was copies from a copy, probably. He hints at drawings, but none were ever found. So through the years, people have then illustrated this. I mean, this copy here, there you go. Somebody's trying to illustrate them. And with better or worse results, There's a new edition out. There's a couple of new editions out that have a better translation and where the authors have tried really hard to illustrate all the points. And so a book, it's even thicker than this, but more than half the book is notes, commentary, and the illustrations that relate back to things in the text. So people have been working with Vitruvius for a long time. At the start of the Renaissance, Leon Battista Alberti, he wrote one too. Now, Vitruvius wrote his in Latin and in old ancient Roman Latin. Alberti wrote his in Latin also, Latin of the day. His was also unillustrated, and it was meant for the kings and the royals and the rich people. But then Sebastiano Serlio, wrote his in the vernacular Italian and lavishly illustrated it as the first real illustrated book on architecture. And then Vignola and Palladio and
what
Scamozzi.
year was that?
That was, Serlio was, says it in there somewhere. I'll say like 1460?
1562.
1562, okay.
1562.
So 1562. So more than 100 years, 150 years after they find Vitruvius, Serlio finally illustrates his. And it made a huge splash and inspired Vignola and Palladio and Scamozzi, the other Renaissance treatise writers, who all were doing the same kind of thing, trying to codify the rules of architecture. They would travel to Rome, wherever they were, they would travel to Rome and measure what they saw. And then they started to realize that, well, this Corinthian column on this building is different than this building, and different than this building, and different than the way he described it, and different from the way Alberti described it.
Why? Why would they go to this effort than to go look at the ancients, to go look at the past, to make copies of the old guys, and then renew it? Why on earth did these guys do this?
From ancient times, things morphed into what it's called medieval times or the Dark Ages, which were hardly dark, but this time, they had the Romanesque architecture, which is real heavy, and round windows, big heavy arches, the big strength of the walls. And then architects started tearing out the wall and putting in bigger windows and lighter and fancier, pointy arch instead of the round arch. And we've morphed into Gothic architecture. And then Gothic architecture was still going. Well, these things would take 400 years to build,
Yeah.
and so they're started in the 900s and 1000s, and by the Renaissance time, they're still working on them. And then they were trying in the Renaissance to go back to the beauty that they saw in the ruins of Rome.
Yeah, and there's something to be said. There is something to be said if you've ever been to the Louvre, to some of these museums that actually have. Because even in Vitruvius, he's referring back to the ancients.
Yeah.
And so not only is the Renaissance going back to the ancients, meaning Vitruvius, but Vitruvius in his book is going back to the ancients, meaning the Greeks.
Yeah.
And the artistic capabilities in sculpture and artistry of the Greeks was remarkable.
Yes. And we don't know, well, I don't know that we know how they did it exactly. Did they sketch these out with charcoal on a slate? Did the builders just know how to build? And see, the Gothic builders, they had these secret master mason guilds that all the knowledge was transmitted verbally. And if you shared it outside of your guild, you were, and so then they find Vitruvius. Alberti starts writing things about what it means to be an architect. And all of a sudden, architects are separated from the master builder. And they really are the ones who started architect as a fashion, as a thing. Architect is designing and drawing. We used to build models, but Alberti says, no, you ought to be drawing stuff out now. And so it separates the builder person from the design person. And that started the profession of architecture, which the subsequent treatise writers all kind of reinforced, that this is the architect working, and then the builder builds it, the architect designs it.
So we have treatise after treatise after treatise that seems to stay in harmony with each other regarding kind of the fundamental understanding of what architecture is, that is in harmony with what essentially Vitruvius wrote about Vanitas, Commoditas, and Renistus. And
they're all a little bit different. And they were, if you read through them carefully, they talk about, I want to simplify it. I want to simplify this system. And there's like 4 or 5 of them through the centuries that have tried to simplify it. Is this? Yeah. So this is a really nice copy. Wow. Yeah. So Vignola, he was one of the first who said, I want to simplify things. And he simplified and started to understand the relationship between the 5 orders, where Serlio just drew them all as the first one to draw them all, but the Vignola really tried to simplify it. And then William Ware in 1903, he tried to simplify it again and super simplified it, which is the numbers that I have burned in my brain.
Yeah.
That I can work with. But other people do the point is that they're all different. In the 1700s, Charles Perrault, I don't speak French, so I don't know if I'm saying that right. Charles Perrault said exactly what we're talking about. Everything is different. What the treatise writers wrote and what I can see in Rome myself is all different. So, and nothing has emerged as a standard. So I'm just going to make my own.
There you go.
And so he did the same thing that these guys, he made his own. But in the meantime, Vignola, his work out of Italy, his book, jumped to France and then was used in the École des Beaux-Arts. And so when it landed in America from the École, then William Ware says, in the book, he says, it seems like Vignola's has emerged as the standard. So I'm going to simplify it and we can just keep using that. And so much of the Gilded Age work and the American Renaissance stuff from the 1870s or so into the 1940s really came out of that, tracing its genealogy back to Vignola, back to Raleigh.
This is such a fascinating history, because if anyone who's traveled abroad and traveled to some of these old cities, it's like you could tell what the old stuff is and what the new stuff is, and where do we all go hang out and want to eat? We want to go to the old stuff. We want to go to the stuff that is a function or a physical development of these treatises.
Yeah.
It's like the people who were building at those times, they were using this as their foundation to create their cities and their architecture.
Right.
And that is why they all feel so beautiful, yet have a regional character that accommodates their local histories. But this is all still infused into the culture of the architecture. And that's why it's absolutely remarkable that there almost seems to be infinite variety in the expression of this.
So we talked about the design process. Another of these balls that we're throwing in the air is, what's it going to look like?
Yeah.
And and what should it look like? What's the right thing? And that's another of the Vitruvius's principles, is decorum, I think is the word he uses, is what's the right thing to do? And with classical architecture, Robert Adams explains this really well. You can dial it up or you can simplify it.
Yeah.
And if you start high and simplify it, then you've got the bones in the right place. And it'll still look good, even if you have to really pare it down and really simplify it. He teaches that well. And so in designing things, we're thinking, I want this room to have this kind of character. That's one of my favorite words in classicism, is what is the character of this space? What do I want it to feel like to the patron, the person that walks through? I want them to feel this. What do I want them to feel? What's the character that they need in this room as opposed to the corridor they came from and the other room they came from? And that's another thing that you got to keep in mind. And I want it to look like this.
How does your environment, the physical form, actually do that to provide decorum and propriety and elevate one space above another?
I think it does it a lot. And maybe it's just the lovesick architect that can sense it and feel it. But I think people feel it.
Yeah.
And they may not be able to verbalize it. Like, wow, I really love this place.
Mm-hmm.
This place is really beautiful. Or as opposed to another place that has not been thought like that. You know, the 80s glass box architecture doesn't have that kind of feel. But the 30s Art Deco office building really does.
Why?
It has it because it has this kind of character, deliberately attempted to show a character and to have a feeling in the space, and deliberately intended to be beautiful.
Okay.
As opposed to something that is just functional, I don't care.
So I want to run something by you. So this is how I've kind of distilled it and began to just try to understand all this stuff, because my beef with my architectural education, which was absolutely brilliant, was anytime we were traveling, we were learning the rigidity of classical architecture. It's like, here's the chords, here's how you play the chords, here's the poetry or the music you can make with these particular chords.
Right.
And every time we'd travel anywhere, it seemed like there was a lot more than just those chords. It's like they were having these chords, they were doing really fancy stuff with this music. And I kept thinking, there's got to be more. But even more so than that, when I first got into school, I thought classical architecture was everything that just looked nice. I didn't realize it was classical architecture in terms of a style, the Greco-Roman, neoclassicism, all that type of stuff, along with craftsmen, Spanish colonial revival, and all of the other different stylistic interpretations of vernacular and high architecture historically. And so I thought it was all just classical architecture. And so as I was trying to explore the theories that underpinned all of this stuff that made a thing beautiful, because in the end, that's the discussion. We can figure out what function is. We can figure out how to construct something so it's durable. So we can get those two Vitruvian principles down pretty well. But the last one that it remains is the beauty, which embeds in it the decorum idea. So what I tried to do is distill down all of these different styles and figure out, okay, which one of these principles are the same in every single style? What do all of these styles have in common? I don't want to know what makes them different. I want to know what makes them the same. The things eventually that I came up with that seemed to make sense to me in every single style, regardless of what you were looking at, especially when it came to individual homes, was there was always some sort of clear massing, a simplified clear massing. Even in Victorian times with turrets and everything, there were volumes that resolved themselves in roofs in obvious ways. Right. Even if they were flat roofs, the composition of any given facade was still very clear. It didn't have too much stuff. So that was one. Another one that seemed to make sense to me, and I want you to poke holes in this and say where I'm wrong, was that all of them just use natural materials, and just the function and nature of materials. If you're sculpting from nature and you're sculpting from nature properly, it will be more beautiful than if you're using engineered materials. Period. End of story.
Right.
And then the other one, and you have to use those natural materials in a way that would be consistent with their physical properties as being used structurally, if they were actually used structurally.
As if, yeah.
Yep. And then the other one, there was no way to actually boil this down into a really nice way to say it, but it was order through visual hierarchy. And so there was a very clear order to any given composition that was created by using the design principles and elements to generate visual hierarchy. So I knew where I was going, how I was.
But ordering is the first of the 6 principles that Vitruvius mentions.
Yes.
It's a weird word, but what it seems to translate to is an overarching thought and a system. And maybe it's even the rules that guide and direct this.
Yes.
So it is the party, as you mentioned. It is the thing that makes it fit.
But in your modernist education, if I'm a modernist, I'm sitting here, there's a lot of order in modernism. In fact, probably too much order. Such rigidity within the rhythm of the bays.
Yeah, the structural grid,
and all that type of stuff.
The ribbon window, the curtain wall glass.
And so it's almost like ordering no longer is like a fundamental principle, even though it has to be, because if it's just chaos, you have a lot of vernacular architecture which doesn't have order to it. You can go see an Irish cottage built out of stone that has a door here, a little window, and a tiny little window, and a roof kind of thatched that doesn't make any sense, and the walls are kind of scattywampus and that type of stuff. And there's this, in my opinion, an objective beauty about it that's inherent due to the nature of the craftsmanship of the materials, even though there's no order in it.
And the building culture of its day and time.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they built stuff.
Yeah. And so it's like embedded in it is history of man.
Right.
There's like humanity embedded in it. Whereas when machines build buildings, many extrusions and stuff, there's no humanity in it. And then the last one, which I think is, in my opinion, one of the most important, is properly proportioned details. Because it's the details, regardless of the style, and the style are the things which make the details it. And if they get too big, then they turn into a caricature of the thing in a cartoon. If they stay properly proportioned, then they are properly representative of whatever narrative and story that particular culture is trying to tell.
Yeah. Like postmodernism had the idea that these kind of classical things were good. We can use them again, but they overscaled them. They oversized. They made them the caricature that you speak of, and got them out of shape, and made people crazy.
But we never recovered from them.
We never know. But I think the modern classical movement owes a debt to postmodernism, as it was the wake-up call that allowed the modern classical movement, I think, to generate.
To emerge.
And some of the timing of it was about that same time too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these treatises, the earliest one was Robert Chitham in 1985. And I was doing this postmodern thing in architecture school in 84. And so it was with Michael Graves and those guys, it was starting all at the same time, that people were able to take the idea of postmodernism or what postmodernism was trying to do, and then actually really do it and bring it back to reality, following back to the ancients.
So in all of this, so am I missing anything in my little theory in terms of like the four fundamentals that really drive any given thing? I know it's simplified, but
no, I think that's great. No, I really do, because that's your methodology. I think you're right, by the way, but I think those things as can be the guiding principles that push you through a tough design pro. That, yes, I've got to do this. And you can teach that, the advanced method, to your employees, your students, and they can learn that from you. And I think you're exactly on. And some of those things are the things that Robert Adam mentions in his book, and some of the things that I've written in my little treatise of design principles.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? It's like, what if I'm an old person driving down the freeway and I get off and I go on a main street that has strip mall after strip mall after strip mall, and I'm just sick of the raised levels of cortisol in my blood because of the stress of traffic, sitting in traffic, and the ugliness of the world generally. What on earth do I do as a normal person?
You go home.
You go home?
No, you go home, and hopefully you've made your home a place of peace.
Yeah.
Visual, or just spiritual and emotional health. Because it is disconcerting. There's, you drive around Taylorsville in Salt County, and it's just strip mall on strip mall.
Yeah.
And the parking lots sometimes link and sometimes not. You could go the whole length of 3500 South through the parking lots of the strip malls.
Yeah.
Which is really sad. But there, we have to be better as our architect profession, not just the, I want to say the elitist, because I sometimes feel like I'm talking that way, but not just the classes, but all the architecture has to be better. But it's driven, much of the squalor that we see, we'll call it that, of the strip mall is driven by the big box architect wherever they live.
Mm-hmm.
And the absolute least amount of money that I can spend in an initial investment for the developer who's going to build this little store and then try to turn it in 5 years.
Yeah.
And then somebody else will remodel it and try to turn it in 5 years.
Yeah.
Because that is really what's driving, because there isn't the imperative, the social imperative that I have to make this beautiful. Another thing I've learned in classical architecture is that architecture is a civic art. It's not about me, the designer. It's not too much about this building that I designed.
Mm-hmm.
It's contribution to the city.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because you're not in charge of the whole city. And you're lucky because you get this, 6.3 acres to do something on, You're not in charge of everything. And so you can't really influence everything around you, but you can do your best work to influence the immediate environment. And that's kind of all we can do, is kind of one little cog at a time, on one little project at a time. And if architects were always, and developers were always thinking about what is the contribution to the city? And it's not another Shopco. That's or a Costco or a Walmart. That's not the contribution to the city. What is the contribution to the city? We don't think about that.
No, not at all.
We try to. You try to think about this, but most of the world has not been thought like that.
No. And in the end, architects really only are as good as their patron.
Yeah.
It's like in the end, the people with the money, the people are ponying up the money and the risk of the development, those are the ones that we are subject to.
And rare is the client that really wants to do something nice for the world. Yeah. They want their own building to be good, of course.
Yeah.
But to be able to push that outward is really hard, because if it costs me another dime, I don't want to do it.
Right.
And it's hard and I don't blame them. It's their money.
Yeah.
But gone are the days where we're contributing to the fabric of the city.
Yeah. I remember reading a quote that said something to the effect of the inside of the house belongs to the man, but the outside belongs to the man in the street.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, but we don't think that way.
We don't think that way at all. I think the lesson from architectural treatises is there is a great amount of brilliant knowledge that has made an absolutely beautiful world. And if we look at what we've done over the last 100 years, we should probably rethink the future.
We have stepped away from the deliberate intent of beauty.
Yeah. Speaking of beauty, what are the two most beautiful projects that you'd say you've been a part of?
It can't be two.
Okay. What are the 10 most beautiful projects you've been a part of?
I can't think of another word but blessed.
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed to have worked on some really terrific projects. And I pay tribute to my client, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They want to build beautiful buildings with noble, enduring materials. And that's been most of my professional life, has been working with that client, building beautiful buildings, and where they deliberately want it to be beautiful. They deliberately want it to fit into the fabric of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Deliberately want it to have a character and a feeling. And you talk about a once in a lifetime project. Well, once in 1,000 lifetimes project. And I've had a bunch of those. And so it's I can't just say, oh, this one or this one. Different projects stand out to me for different things and different reasons. A project I think is especially beautiful and meaningful is the Provo City Center Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was a beautiful old meeting house. It was called a tabernacle, but it was a rectangular assembly space with a horseshoe gallery. There's a million of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
This one was really lovely, and it was kind of Victorian. And it had a devastating fire. It was much used and much loved. And they were putting on a big Christmas pageant, and an electrician turned on a light switch and didn't realize the light was sitting on a piece of plywood and caused a big old fire. And wood fires burn hot and fast, so the roof and the whole infrastructure fell in. The organ, made of bronze pipes, they all melted into a blob, and this building was lost. Fortunately, it had these exterior pilasters which held the walls up. Fortunately, the city fire marshal, who has the authority to pull the walls in, said, no, let's leave them up. I think it's out. I think they'll be okay. And then the church had the will to preserve this thing. And so we knew who the architect was. Initially, we were going to restore it and turn it back into what it was, this meeting hall with an organ. I was about ready to buy tickets to go with the organists to Germany to pick out the organ and to start designing the organ case, because we knew what we were going to rebuild this building. And then the church decided, no, let's repurpose this thing into a functioning temple building for the church members in that community. And that's really my experience with historic buildings, is kind of the repurpose, the adaptive reuse of the building. We knew who the original architect was. We studied his work, William Folsom, who designed that building while he was living in Manti, working on the Manti Temple. And it was built as a beautiful building. We knew it had not been documented well until the fire, but everything that came out was wiped clean, documented, measured, and figured out what it was.
What were some of the most fascinating things that came out of that you remember?
You know, there was some artwork that was singed around the edges, but not in the middle, which people attribute to a miracle. You know, this painting of Jesus and the outside is singed and the inside is not, you know. There weren't any like really cool things except to see all of the details. And then we could see then all of a sudden historic photos started coming out of everywhere. And so we could see, oh, that's what this was. And you see the baluster, the historic baluster, and its detailing and carving. And so in the new building, we used all of those details, and we tried to make it feel, if William Folsom was doing then what we're doing now in this building, what would he have done? And that we truly had that mindset, that let William Folsom be the hero here and make this building. And so it has a lot of transparent finish wood. It has this beautiful mahogany wood. It's just lovely. It's so lovely. And so much wood. It has this kind of richness. And in the end, we had VE'd out a bunch of wood. And I walk through there now and think, where did it come from? Because there's a lot of wood in there. But it's really beautiful. And it has a spirit. And I'm a person of faith, you know. And it has a spirit in it because of what it is, a house of God. But it also has a spirit that is consistent with the architecture and the feeling and the character of this thing. It's completely, and as perfectly as we could make it, harmonious and congruent with what it was or could have been, had they done then what we did now. And we did that very deliberately. It has a real spirit, a feeling of appropriateness, decorum. We did the right thing here. It matched the character. It hit the level of detail. It has a real great spirit in it. And it's got all of this beautiful wood and things that we could invent. You know, we picked the columbine flower, the Rocky Mountain columbine or whatever it's called, which is a beautiful flower, really hard to draw.
It's got these
five little petals, and then 5 big petals with these swoopy things in the back, and they all hang like this. Things. They hang like this,
yes.
And so they're really hard to draw.
Yeah.
So I was flying back to Philadelphia and spent the whole trip with these bunch of pictures of columbines, and I'm trying to draw them and how do you abstract it so that it's something you could carve on something. And so we've got a bunch of columbines scattered, like Where's Waldo, you know, a bunch of columbines scattered through the building, some on the furniture, some on the walls. And, but it has a real sweet spirit in there. So that's one. Another building that I worked on that I especially appreciate is again, LDS Temple in Hartford, Connecticut. The church had built a temple in Arizona. And they basically said, take this plan, and they had tried to economize and squeezed it a little bit. So literally on the Xerox machine, they bumped it up 10%, handed it to us, and then we redo it and sized the doors and everything. And then we worked it, but we wanted to make it our thought and our direction was, it needs to first be an LDS temple. And if you're familiar with them, you know what they look like.
Yeah.
You know, they're a thing.
Yeah.
They're a building type. But it needed to fit in its community. And so I had a couple of books about New England architecture, and we went and bought a bunch more. Ken Sanders in Salt Lake City, randomly, what a coincidence, had a whole set of books about colonial architecture throughout the Northeast Seaport. Randomly at that very moment we needed some. Here's 9 more books about colonial architecture. And so we studied hard, and we worked really hard. We used James Gibbs to help us design a big tall tower. We used a local building. We spent a couple of days wandering around downtown Hartford and in the neighboring communities looking at their churches. This town, it's in Farmington, was founded in 1633.
That's old.
That's pretty old.
That's old.
And that's pretty old.
Yeah.
So the client, the design managers at the church were in favor of what we were doing. Their boss had grown up in New England, and they're in favor of what we're doing, and guiding and directing us. And we submit the plans to the community, and they said, paraphrasing, I wasn't there, but they said, "How did you guys out west, where the states are square, how did you guys possibly design a building that feels so perfectly appropriate in New England?" And that meant so much to me, because it is a beautiful, beautiful building, but it meant so much to me that it felt right in the community. And it's made of stone, it's carved, and a lot of carved stone on it, which is fancier than anything else around. There are some really great buildings in town, but it's really fancy, but it's really beautiful, and it just feels so good right there.
That brings up a really interesting point in terms of the responsibility of an architect, which we've been talking about for this whole time. But what is like the payoff as the architect? What do you find to be the most gratifying thing?
Well,
because that is very gratifying when someone says,
that was very gratifying.
Whoa, thank you.
One thing, quite honestly, is they paid us money to do this. The first rule of architecture is get the job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, we're sitting in a building that I got paid for.
Yeah, so they paid us. But that was really gratifying to hear that kind of response and to know the people of it. But for me, what's always been the most important thing is to see people in it, loving it.
Yeah.
And walking around like, oh, wow, this is so beautiful, Most architectural photography is devoid of people.
Yeah.
Because you want a very small aperture to get a very deep depth of field, so everything is in focus. That small aperture means you have to have a long exposure time. I'm dating myself because this is the way cameras actually work. Digital cameras don't work that way. So you can't have people in the picture because people cannot hold still for even the half a second. They just people just cannot hold still. And so in the photo, you're going to have people being fuzzy. And up with that, we will not put, So that's why architecture for photos are always devoid of people, which is ridiculous because it's about the people, right?
Yeah.
So you need people in the space to see a person standing there to understand how tall this place is.
Yeah.
To see how big that window is next to this person. So we did a project. It was a school project, Umont High School up in Centerville or Bountiful. They had an interior courtyard that was windswept and one old dead tree in it. And so we put a roof over it and tore off the walls around it, put a roof over it, and made it an inside student commons, kind of a grand stair up to the upper level, and could walk way around it. And there was not a time when there wouldn't be students in it. So I just said, well, take the picture. And so the picture has all these, fuzzy people, but it also shows probably 250 students in this space or more. And I think that really is what this is about.
Yeah.
Is about the people. And so you do a building and they have the ribbon cutting and here we go and people are walking around loving it. Or you come back 2 years later and everybody's in their office working, or they're sitting in the lobby and you see them there and enjoying it, that is the payoff. It's about the people, stupid. It's about people in that space enjoying it.
Yeah.
And how you handle the light and the shape and the character of the space enhances it. And if you did a good job, it'll be lovely and people will appreciate it, whether they can verbalize it or not. And it's really about the people.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
One of the most gratifying things to be is when we have a home in one of the parades or showcases, is to just sit there in the garage, just sit in the house and just watch people walk through it.
Yeah.
Because I've been through a lot of homes in my day and parades of homes, and I've heard a lot of complaints and a lot of whatever, but watching people like, oh, this is so much better than the other one, or this, and there's all of these intangibles.
I could tell you why.
Yeah, I could tell you why. We can give you a tour.
Yeah.
But it's that is the most gratifying thing, is the people.
So I draw with a pen. And I always draw people because, and I always draw me. I'm 5'10", and my wife is 5'2". Just tall. And I draw her to make sure that I'm not putting something in her way, because I'm looking up here, but she's looking down here, right? We did the project once where there was a window mullion about here.
That's a similar story.
And so I draw me and her all over. If you saw a portfolio of my work, there's always me and her everywhere, because I got to make sure that she can see out the window. And it's her, but it's not her. It's just to make sure it fits the people.
Yeah.
And I need to see that person in there to see how tall this space is.
Yeah.
Because how tall is that? Well, I don't know. Is it 9 feet or is it 12 feet?
Yeah.
Or is it 16 feet and that's a really big window? I don't know.
So what you're saying is it's really easy. You just have to think of everything all at once.
You just have to think of everything. But that's it. I mean, that's another of the ball we have to juggle is how will this fit for a tall person or a smaller person or a person in a wheelchair or a kid? That's another thing you need to think about, because it's about the people. And so in SketchUp, we had guys who would model people, and we had like 8 different people. And then now we're doing that in Revit too, so that, because I see a drawing from Revit and it's in, where's the people? And you got to draw people in here.
Yeah.
Because I need to see it and they need to see it.
Yeah.
They need to know that it's about the people.
Yeah.
And we got to make sure that this person here can look out that window and that cross mullion is not exactly in between about here and here.
Yeah.
Because it's about the people. And you've got to put people in there while you're thinking about it.
I love that. So going from Hartford and the people being very enthusiastic that you brought forth your talents to deliver something that the community could love. What's the next project you're like?
Okay. Another one is the same client, same building type, the LDS Temple in Philadelphia. Got a really great site right in town. The temple in Hartford, Connecticut is actually 2 little towns away in Farmington. The temple in Kansas City is actually closer to Liberty than Kansas City. But this Philadelphia temple is right smack downtown.
Yeah.
And it has a real urban presence. And we wanted to make sure that it felt like it belonged. We again spent a couple of days, and every trip I went out there, I would give myself another day to wander the city and take pictures and look at things to make sure that that building fit in the city. And it's a very different building than Hartford or Kansas City.
Yeah.
It's a very different building, very classical, very strong.
Yeah.
I think is a good word for it. A very robust classicism.
Does it sit right next to the post office? Is it the post office?
No, there's the free library.
It's a library.
It's right off at Logan Logan Circle in the square, Logan Circle. There's the free library. Next to it is the Family Courts building, which is a knockoff of that building.
Okay.
It's now a luxury condos, I think. And across the street is the Cathedral Church of Saints Peter and Paul, the Catholic cathedral for the diocese there in Philadelphia. And these are all these Corinthian.
So they're all Corinthian.
Yeah, yes, they're all Corinthian.
And just for everyone, the orders that is Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian in terms of the hierarchy. And Corinthian's the highest order, meaning it has the most elevated decorum or propriety.
Yes, and the columns are a little longer, a little more attenuated. And so it was painfully obvious that, okay, this has got to be this. It's got to fit in here. And at the time, there's the Benjamin Franklin Parkway district or whatever it's called that said we had to match the height of the cornice of the building adjacent to it, which we did. We thought we did, and we got it built. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think we're about 4 feet too tall. Thought we had it right. We had drawings of that building. I don't know what happened. And we're a little taller.
Did you get any beef from?
Nope, because after that, by then, they had taken that requirement off from other buildings that were being built. So we done.
I gotta love finding departments. We got to spend how much money accommodating what?
Here's another example. Same thing. The planning department. We had to present, and I took a little hunk of stone. The stone that we were going to use was this creamy colored stone from Japan or from China, but in the end, they closed they closed the quarry. We had to pick another stone. Picked another stone that was kind of ugly. Fortunately, it didn't meet the specs. And so we picked another stone which had a little higher price point, but it fit in the city perfectly. But I had gone.
It's a granite, isn't it?
It's a granite, yeah, from Maine, it's called Deer Isle. It's this beautiful light gray granite that has this little tinge of lavender in it. It's so pretty. It's beautiful dry. It's beautiful wet. Man, it's so beautiful. First time I saw a big dry lay of the stone panels, I got kind of emotional because I thought, oh my gosh, this is so pretty. Anyway, we're with the planning commission and they said, we're all wrapped up and they said, can I keep this? I said, no. And I said, but I'll get you a piece of it. But then they said, will you please, this was just me and the attorney. The church had hired a local attorney to help us get through the city and stuff. It was me and the attorney. And they said, will you please tell your client, thank you for building this building in our city.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful building. So it was in construction, almost done. And a buddy of mine, one of my partners at FFKR, had gone to Philadelphia, and he and his wife took one of those hop-on, hop-off tourist buses.
Yeah.
To see the city. So they're buzzing around the city. He comes up on the temple. He knew what it was. He asked the guy, the tour guide, what's that building? I don't know. There it says this old building that they're cleaning up.
Yes. Take a bow, Jackson.
Yeah.
Take a bow.
Perfect because it was important to the whole team, not just me, but the whole team, including the owner's team, that this thing feel like it belongs in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And to hear him say that, as goofy as it was, that shame on you for not knowing what it is. It's now in the Philadelphia, architecture tour guide. But to hear him have that kind of reaction to it, that like this thing actually just fits in the city.
And that is what it means to have decorum.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Salt Lake Temple. This is a big one.
It's a big one.
It's still in construction.
Yep. Another year and something to go.
And then it opens up for a year to open house.
The open house is scheduled today to go from like April to October of 27.
Yeah.
So it's not a whole year. It's going to be that 6-month block from April to October.
Which I think for anybody who's always been curious to go in, it's like, well, here's your chance.
This is your chance. I've got neighbors who are saying to me, I hope I live long enough. At least a couple of older women. I hope I live long enough that you're going to take me through.
Yeah.
I say, well, yes, so you better start walking and get healthy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's going to be really beautiful. That project was a labor of love, but it was also a real kind of intellectual and emotional exercise. That building is much loved. It's the symbol, really, of temples to this church. This church builds temples. There's like 300 of them, either announced or built. And this church builds temples, and they're really important to the members. Where we go to church on Sunday might be kind of a junky building, honestly. Sorry to say that.
No, it's true. It's, I call it the the meeting house.
Yeah, and the one that you go to might be different. It might be different, but almost exactly the same as the one down the street, or the one that I go to.
Yep.
Same furniture in the lobby, because it's all about
economy
and being commodious and taking care of what we need.
Yeah,
and they work just fine. Yep. They're not as lovely as the lovesick architect might want them to be, but they work just great.
Yeah.
But these temple buildings, the church really is committed to make them lovely. And the church has a lot of money, we know that, and they're willing to spend it, but they also actually push us on the cost to be responsible. But they're willing to spend the money to make these buildings beautiful. And they have to be careful in many places of the world, because you can't build a building that's more beautiful than the dictator's palace. So the temples in far-flung places are a little simpler, but they're still really lovely. And but the Salt Lake Temple, it means so much to the church community, so much to our city, even if you're not a church member. It took 40 years to build. It's had multiple additions and remodels, a really big one in the 60s that by now is 60 years old and had lost its luster and was leaking badly and had mechanical problems. All the building systems were past their normal appropriate lifespan, and it needed this major remodel. In the meantime, for years, they've been talking about seismic upgrades. We are in an active seismic zone. We had a good little earthquake in March of 2020.
And I'm willing to bet most people don't realize that, but Salt Lake, Wasatch Front, just one zone below most of California.
Yeah, we had a nice little earthquake, and so, but everybody knows that things like that are coming, and so over time, a lot of the school buildings have been basically replaced, scraped off and rebuilt to make them safer and more seismic appropriate. The church with their own buildings, the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, which was the Hotel Utah. I worked on that project 30-something years ago, and it was it was first and foremost a seismic upgrade. And the church had been doing that. The Salt Lake City and County Building was one of the very first base isolated buildings in the world. It was in the earliest, probably top first 5 or 10, And the state of Utah had spent a gob of money base isolating our beautiful state capitol designed by Richard Clayton. And so this is what we're doing in the Salt Lake Valley, is to try to protect these great buildings from earthquakes that we know are here and coming. And we had a nice little tremor in March of 2020, which we then all looked at our structural engineers and they said, that size of earthquake, what we see about it, this building performed exactly the way we thought. We are on track.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough to damage anything. We're doing a project at the Greek Orthodox Church downtown in Salt Lake City, designed by Pope and Burton, which is awesome, beautiful little Byzantine building.
The one next Pioneer.
Kitty Corner Pioneer Park.
Yeah. Love that.
It's such a beautiful building by Pope and Burton, who did all these early Mormon temples. They did Laie and Carson.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's just a beautiful little building. But it suffered some damage in the earthquake. The exterior masonry is okay, but the interior plaster cracked all over. And it's taken till now to get everything improved and get FEMA to help fund the fix-up of it. So we're working on that. So this earthquake happened, and so we knew what was coming. We wanted to base isolate the building. But the building is really big. And the walls are 8 feet thick of granite, which is ridiculous. But the first idea was to build it out of, you'll have to cut this on the tape. I'm having a brain fart.
And it's okay.
Adobe. Brigham Young said, let's build it out of adobe.
Okay.
He seemed to think that you build it out of adobe, it'll eventually settle into a great big sandstone rock. And everybody's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And he said, yeah, I'll prove it. So he built a tower on some property he owned, and a couple of rainstorms away, and then it kind of started to dissolve. Like, oh, okay, so use the local granite, but kept these foundations that are so giant. But the base isolator technology from the city and county building done in 83 or 4, it was done while I was a student. That early base isolation building to the 2003 or 4 for the Utah State Capitol, the base isolator technology was not able to handle a building as big as ours, as the Salt Lake Temple, until just recently. So now the question is, now that we can do it, should we do it? And the answer was like, yes, because we can. We ought to do that, to preserve it. And there have been the usual sorts of old building surprises. You know, this wasn't exactly the way we thought. Even though we looked in 3 places, those were the 3 places that matched. Everywhere else was off, you know. And this building, this wall that we thought was this is not that. It's something else. And so, but you get that in any old building remodel.
And you're
just the size and scope of this is bigger because it's a bigger building.
Yeah.
And so we're doing this giant base isolation work, which is all done. And it's taken like 4 years to do, with base isolators that are 5 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
So in the big earthquake, when the ground is going like this, the building's going to be going like this, up to 5 feet this way, up 5 feet that way. So everything is set in there. So the building has to be stiff enough to not flop over while it's moving, but everything is set to stay together and move this 5 feet in any direction. And in the meantime, then we have to redo all the interior. And again, we're studying what this building is. The team before us, of the local architect, GCBO, with Josh Probert, the genius historic interior architecture guy, and a general contractor, they did this historic structures report, and then a kind of design guidelines of what this building is and was and should be and could be. And so we followed that kind of direction, and we did everything we could to make this building fit and feel like it was. Now, we changed some things because church leadership wanted to do things differently, arrange things a little bit differently. And so things will be different. When you walk in, things will be different, but the intent is that it will feel the same. And it will have, I promise you, the same spirit that it had before. And I'm speaking in mystical, spiritual terms, but this is a house of God.
You know what?
And
you got to speak of it, because that's what architecture is.
Yeah, it is.
Honestly, regardless of your religion.
Yeah.
And those spiritual, mystical experiences can happen in a house dedicated to God. The supreme being.
I believe that 1,000%. And you know, and I've been building temples, been working on temple projects my whole career, and they're so interesting because the workers, they sense this too.
Yeah.
Of whatever faith they might be or no faith, they know this is a house of God.
Yeah.
And they literally will do their best work. I've seen electricians pull out work and redo it because it wasn't
good enough.
It wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that kind of work. The concrete is not good enough. We'll tear that out and we'll redo that. It's amazing to see the workers, from the bosses of the company and the subcontractors, clear down to the laborers and the workers. They care because this is a house of God. And these buildings really take that spirit from all the craftsmen that care, the designers who care, and all of the local church members who care. And that all adds up to the spirit that these buildings have.
Imagine if we lived in a world where developers, home builders cared that level, grasping cared that level, because I think
make a huge difference.
That was the spirit of construction and building in every city, everywhere. But up until we started worshiping efficiency and convenience.
45.
Yeah. And that's why when we have old historic buildings especially homes, most of the time when I remodel them, we just do additions and then repaint and then maybe upgrade some of the mechanical systems, electrical systems, but we never like wholesale tear down, remodel an old historic building. We do it for everything.
Where do Americans go for vacation?
Yeah.
We go to these old cities in Europe.
Yeah.
And we walk around and say, well, they don't build them like this anymore. Well, no, they don't, but we sure could.
We could. We
Yes,
absolutely
we
could.
could.
It's
But we
our
don't.
choice.
It's our choice.
It's
Yeah.
our choice.
So the Salt Lake Temple is a really unique building. Brigham Young, church leader, prophet long ago, said he saw in vision what that building should look like on the spot where they built it. And he said subsequent to that, every time I looked at that spot of ground, I saw the building standing there. And so then he works with the architect to make sure that the building they built and designed matched what he was seeing in his head. And it's so iconic and so beautiful. It's strong, big, thick walls, these heavy buttresses, arched round oval windows, round arches. It's very kind of Romanesque.
Yeah.
Really, it's a Romanesque building.
Yeah.
But it fools you because the towers on the corners.
They're proportioned like a Gothic.
The towers are kind of Gothic, and they go up and they have finials and spires and spikies all over. So, and they're octagonal corners, which is a very Gothic thing. Yeah. And so the building is Romanesque-ish and Gothic-ish. Yeah. And it's also kind of a castle because it's got castellations and battlements. And so it's this kind of hybrid, weird architecture of Romanesque Gothic castle thing, which you could lump easily into Victorian eclecticism.
Yeah.
But it is all of these things. And the idea of the being a castle was, I think, deliberate as kind of a defense against evils of the world and the people that wanted to damage the church early on. A lot of the other early temples in the state of Utah are also castellated with the idea of defense, which I think is really interesting. Wow. But the inside is more Renaissance revival, neo-proto-Renaissance revival-ish. A lot of unique things. And we know that certain contractors did these rooms and somebody else did that room. And the contractor might say, Clayton, you go do that room. We'll stay here and do this room. And you would do things a little differently. So the moldings have some consistency, but they're also inconsistent from the historic building. But the work that we did really took out so much of the interior fabric that what we put back is consistent with the inconsistency and the variations that we saw historically. But it would cost so much to make this one different than that one. We made them all the same. But they're all in the same character of the historic building and what was there. And the moldings are matched. And even things, the things that we could have saved had so much paint on them. And the effort to strip that paint, half or more of which is lead-based paint. A lot of these things were cleaned off enough that we could carefully measure them, and they were discarded, and we built new. And there's a lot of people upset. Oh, yeah. There are people who are upset about that. Oh, yeah. But the economy of building in today's world, it used to be materials and labor were 50-50. But now the labor costs are more than the material costs. And so the labor to strip this door frame that's 17 feet tall, and the moldings are 12 inches wide, the labor to strip that and refinish it is astronomical compared to we'll carefully document it and measure it. We'll make new knives. We'll cut and make a new one. Yeah. And I think there will be people who are upset about that. Yeah. I get it. I totally get it because the thought of losing that personal handcraft chiseling, rather than going through a CNC machine, it's like, but that was a humanity that was embedded into the building. How could you dare take that out? And so, but that's in terms of like, if we go back to these treatises that we've been talking about,
in Vitruvius, one of the things that he talks about in his, I think, 5 fundamentals, right underneath the corn, is economy.
Yeah, this last one, it's allocation is the word.
Allocation.
But it's economy that you got to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And you have to be responsible for the resources, and you have to be able to pay for it.
Yeah.
Which sometimes sets the goodie level, right?
Yeah.
Sets the design level of, we can't afford that, but we can afford this, and that's just the reality of the economics, because we don't have them, the architect doesn't have the funds to build this. We're relying on the patron, the owner, to pay their hard-earned money, and we have to respect that.
Yeah.
And utilize and maximize the value for those resources.
In reading something like Vitruvius and some of these other, I am amazed that in spite of all of the so-called technological advances that we've experienced as humanity, with phones and iPhones and computers and digital virtual realities, all of the fundamental things that drive humanity are the same. We are still us.
Yeah.
And if we can actually pursue the same basic triad that existed forever, goodness, beauty, and truth,
Yeah.
and in architecture pursue.
That was Plato, right?
Yeah, Plato and Aristotle.
Truth, goodness, and beauty.
Yeah.
And then Vitruvius then said, firmness, commodity, don't.
For architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we can't ever get there until we have a conversation about beauty. What is beauty? Can you quantify beauty, or can you actually define it in objectivity?
Yeah.
Because until we can all come to some sort of...
And it's really hard.
It's hard.
It is really hard. I read a book by Rogers
Scruton.
About beauty.
Yeah.
And he poses, and I agree, that we can know what beauty is.
Oh, yeah.
But it's hard to say it's this and this and this and this.
It's almost impossible.
Because, and there is the idea of beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
so I look at this and I think that's beautiful. And you look at that and think, no, it's not really. But some of that is, I can condition myself to think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a man named David Broussat. He's out of Providence, Rhode Island. He has a blog about architecture. It's actually really interesting. Talks a lot about Providence architecture. He said something that appreciation, I'll paraphrase it and butcher it, but appreciation of modern architecture is a learned response.
Yeah.
But appreciation of classical architecture is intuitive.
So there's a quote that actually was the foundation of my thesis in graduate school from Thomas Jefferson, who said, state a moral case to a plowman and a professor, and the plowman will get it right more often than the latter because he's not been led astray by artificial rules. And that was how Jefferson put it.
Yeah.
Because you have to be trained through artificial rules to appreciate things that go against a standard intuitive.
Yeah. So I can see a modern building, a contemporary building, and think, I don't like that. That's not that beautiful. But I can see this one and think, I kind of like that one.
Yeah.
That one's okay. And I can say, yes, I like that. But I can see an old building, and instinctively my beauty scale rate is going to be an 8 or 9. Instinctively, it's quicker.
Yeah. Wow. So,
but Alberti talks a lot about beauty.
Yeah.
And he said, beauty is when you reach the point. It's interesting that it's not an actual definition of what is, but it's more of what is. You reach the point where you can't add anything to it or take anything away without it being detrimental. And he says, it's hard to find, and it takes our best effort.
Yeah.
And then further on, he talks about, it's about proportions. It's about scale. It's about appropriateness. He lists a lot of the same kind of Vitruvian principles of what makes things beautiful. And that's what beauty is. And I think we have to look for it. We have to work for it.
I think we just need to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we just have to be honest with ourselves and not be academicized out of our natural intuitions.
Yeah.
And not be so concerned about what other people think about what's cool. And one of the issues is just our infatuation with novelty and coolness. And
which is the hallmark of modern architecture.
Yeah. And which can be done really cool. And there's no doubt about it. It's cool. Really cool. But cool isn't necessarily timeless, nor is it an appropriate use of resources. Because, and when you're doing stuff that, I think one of the biggest issues with the sustainability movement, which is a good thing, is that, guys, unless it's visually sustainable, it's not really fully sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, that's something Vitruvius says is the best way to protect an old building is to make it beautiful.
Yeah.
People will protect and save an old building.
That's
marauding armies will not ruin your cultural heritage and tear down this beautiful old building.
Yeah.
They'll destroy everything else but leave the beautiful building.
Yeah.
And so you want to save your building, make it beautiful. And people will love it, and the people will protect it.
Yeah. That's 100% true. And I think that's probably a good place to end this thing. Roger, you are epic. Thank you. You've had an incredible career. It's such a pleasure to talk to you one-on-one.
Thank you.
And
you too. I feel the
and
same
this
way.
is, yeah, you have so much more to give. I hope you can actually distill all of that knowledge into the students that you teach, even in professional practice programs at Utah Valley University, and make, and just give the world more of who you are and what you know.